Hey guys, Test here, and today we'll be going through rehearsal 4 of the Python free lessons. So today we'll be doing files and we'll be doing a small project, which is the bank code in the previous session, just that we add on the functionality of saving and writing, saving and reading from a file. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so in Python when you write a program, let's say x equals to 4 and then you print x, right? Then after that when you run, right, and then the next time you run, right, your program completely restarts and all your variables are reinitialized and your previous program state is lost. So if you have saved some valuable information onto the variables in the previous program execution, then after you restart the program, everything is lost. Basically, for example, in our bank case, right, when we store all the people's balances and we change a lot of info here and there, but the problem is if we restart the program, then our bank dictionary would return back to its original value, which we initialize it to become. So there's currently no way to transmit information between one program execution and the another program execution. So today we're going to circumvent that by using files. So you know how you are writing let's say you're writing a Word document, right? Then you can save the file, and then when you close the file, you shut off the computer. When you return, right, the file is still there containing the information. Then when you open it up, you continue with where you left off previously. So similarly, today in Python, we'll learn how to save information to text files. So for example, let's begin by learning how to read from a file. So let's create a file that we call test.txt. Okay, so we go ahead, click on the test.txt file here, and let's write some information. And then we write text, and lastly we type some whatever we want this to be. Okay, so we control S, we save it, right? So how do I access this information in some text file using Python? To do it in Python, we can use the open command. Um so we can write with open the file name and then close the brackets as F. So basically this would store the file, right, that we just opened. You store the file we just opened in the variable F. You can name this anything else you want. We can call it file, we can call it my file. Yeah, let's call it F for convenience. Then after that, you press enter, you see the new indentation, similar to it's similar to the it's similar to um it's similar to the for loop or if statements where you have an indentation indicating a block of code. So we can print, and to read the file contents, we write f.read. So f.read will return a string that contains the file's content. So if we go ahead and run this, you're gonna see this is what we see. We see the whatever is inside this text file. Okay, so you can also write to a file, right? So for example, if I open the test.txt, right, and then if I want to write to a file, I'll put an additional parameter in here, comma w, so it's another parameter, and instead of reading, I'll write f.write, and I'll write whatever I want in here. So let's say I'll touch this replaces everything. Then when I originally write the text file is this, I haven't run the program yet, but when I run the program, you see that the text file is now replaced with whatever I wrote in here. So when you write things in W mode, right, it replaces whatever is in the file. So if I let's say go ahead and change to some available information here, save it, right? But if as soon as I run this, it replaces whatever's in the text file, and the text file only has whatever I write. Okay, so that's writing to a file. So of course, writing to a file, replacing everything in a file might seem a little bit scary because maybe your file has some important information, you just deleted everything. So how do we, what is there a way to append to a file, meaning that you add to the file instead of replacing all the contents that's in the file? And the answer is yes. So the answer is actually we just replace here this W, right, with A, right, and then whatever I write here, let's say I write this appends to it. Then when I press run, right, you see currently the file is this. After I press run, currently the file is this replaces everything. After I press run, you can see that it's done. This replaces everything, this replaces everything, this appends to it. So you see we've added to the end of the file instead of um instead of replacing whatever's in it. So if I run this again, right, it's gonna append another copy of this append to it. And yeah, so okay, now one question is, right, how do I know that I need to put A here? Like, it seems that so far all the information I've given you in the past few lessons is like I'm just telling you, right? And you may be wondering, where do I know, how do I know these things? Um, the answer is that actually this there's a when you program stuff, it's important to know how to search up things by yourself, also how to learn it by yourself. So to self-learn things, you basically search it up. So for example, I'm keen in appending to a file. So I search Python. I can go to the Python documentation as one option. So I file append to file Python. Okay. And okay, so one option is the Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is quite a popular website. It's a forum that allows you to ask questions and people can answer it for you. And often, if you search a question, somebody else might have probably run into the same error before and had the same question. So you'll probably be able to find it on Google. So Googling is an important skill. Okay, so you see the question, how do you append to a file instead of overwriting it? And this one, this answer, which has so many upvotes, right, says this can be achieved by setting the mode to append. So you can see that this is some test code that a person wrote, example code, sample code, and this is where you can learn that you put an A in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this guy upvote. I don't have enough reputation to do so. Okay, so this is how I know. Another way I know is that if I can go to the Python file, open, right, and let's say I go here. So this is the official Python documentation. If I go in here and I search for the phrase append, you see that they say reading and writing files, open returns a file object, right? And then you can say A opens the file for appending. So that's how I also know that A is the correct thing to do. Okay, so that's how I know this is A and not some other weird letter, and that's how I know how to do certain things in Python. And you can learn it too. So the point of this append, right, is not just to tell you how to append to a file. The point of this slide is to teach you that you can find out things by yourself by Googling, right, or finding information on forums. Yeah, so in coding, things that you learn in school, things that you learn in your uni courses, they are only going to teach you the foundations, right? That from there you can build up. So for example, in the first 3 lessons, I taught you the foundations in programming concepts, variables, for loops, and stuff like that. And from there, you can then search. If you want to do something, it's likely that you don't know enough yet. And then that's where you search for the additional functionality you want. So for example, you want to learn how to make a website, then you search how to make a website in Python, and the resources will lead you. But as long as you're, but what I'm able to teach you is the foundations, because I cannot teach you every single nitty-gritty detail, and you need to find out by yourself. So enough blabbering. Let's go on to, yeah. So let's say we want to read a file, right? So previously we had read, we just had the read, and then we had print f.read. So previously we had this, right? And um, let's say we want to read line by line. So let's just delete this line and say that we have some information. Let's say we have, because we're moving towards our blank example, let's say we have this information, at least 100 Bob, 200 Charlie, minus 10. So if we run our code, right, then f.read prints all of this as one massive thing like that. Let's say I want to read line by line. So, okay, so the goal, first of all, is to translate a text file like that into, 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 into our program variables. So right now, this is just one giant string. Python sees it as one giant string, right? And the goal is to use different lines of code to translate this giant string into information that we store in our variables. In this case, we want to translate this giant string into a dictionary. So how do we do so? We do so step by step. Okay, so there's a function called readLine. So if I print f.read, right, I get just a file. But if I print f.readLines, I'm going to get is the read lines are going to split the file, the file, the entire file into different lines. So it's going to split it into, you see, now I get a list, right? Now I get a list of 3 items, 3 elements. Each element is each line. So the first line with Alice, right? And then the backslash n is actually just a new line character. So this is something new that we encounter today. A new line character tells Python to go into the new line. Then we see the next line and the next line, Charlie. So now read lines we see is an array, right? So how do I access each element in the array? I can do so using a for loop. So I can for loop through it. So for the line, let's call my variable line in s.readlines. And what can I do? I can print the line. Okay, so for example, say print this line is, yeah. So it's going to say this line is Alice 100, this line is Bob 200, this line is Charlie 100 minus 10. So okay, so let's go ahead and delete this. So we now store each line in the variable and iterate through the lines loop using a for loop. Okay, so the first to translate this into a more a friendlier form for us to process, right? I'm going to remove the annoying new lines. So I'm going to do so using .fit. And how do I know it's .fit? It's because I've also Googled. So if I say Python remove \n, what I'm going to see? I'm going to see that there's some suggestions for R strip, right? Okay, so see we see that the line dot strip. Okay, there's some people facing errors with it. Yeah, so perhaps okay, let's Google another thing. So perhaps I search Python remove new line. You can see the first suggestion is use a strip function to remove a new line character from the string in Python. So that's how I know that the dot strip remove the new line. So if I go ahead and run this, you see that I no longer have an annoying new line, right? The new line is only the one inserted by the print function. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, so okay, then another thing is this spacing over here. I'm going to remove it because when later I'm going to split the string by the colon and I want the right side to be an integer or a float, right? So if I have the spacing, then it's going to be a little bit confusing. So let's just remove the spacing. So let's search how to do so in Python. Python remove space, remove blank space. Okay, remove blank space. What does that give me? So they say that, okay, Stack Overflow again, remove all white spaces. This guy want to eliminate all white spaces. And then somebody suggested strip, right? And somebody suggested dot replace the blank with no blank. So this should work, right? Let's give it a try. So string dot replace, pass in the string dot replace the blank space that I want to remove, and whatever I replace it with, the empty string. Okay, so if I print this, you see that now at least 100 no longer has the space before 100. Okay, so now that's wonderful. The next thing I want to do is I want to split the string by the colon. So how do I do so? Once again, I go ahead and Google Python split string by a character. So okay, we see that the first option is seems decent, right? Python string split method. Okay, so we see the first example. We have a string called welcome to the jungle. Text, if we call the x equal text of split and print x, we're going to see a list with 4 items. Welcome to the jungle. Because each one of those are separated by a space. Okay, seems promising, but I don't want to split by a space. I want to split by a colon. So let's scroll down a little bit more. See the syntax is we call the string that we want to split it, we call the split function the separator, and then the max split. So this is the optional parameter, this is optional also, but this one is the one we specifies the operator to use the splitting string. By default it's a white space. Okay, so for example, if they put it like that, then let's see the output, then they split by commas instead of white spaces. So that seems like what we want. The separator in this case is going to be colons instead of white spaces. So let's go ahead and try that out. So I'm just going to resize it a little bit more. Okay, so yeah, so let's go and try that out. So so after line.strip the replace, I'm going to do split and split by colons. Let's go ahead and run. And in fact, we see wonderful. We have Alice 100, Bob 200, Charlie minus 10. Okay, wonderful. So with this, right, we will now have a list, right? This thing we just printed is a list. So let's go ahead and store it in perhaps a variable called line info, right? And if I print line info, you're going to see that I'm going to get the same. I'm just storing in a variable instead of printing out directly. Okay, so now this line info, if I print the first element, right, index 0, I'm going to get all the names. But if I print index 1, I'm going to get all the values, all the balances. Okay, so wonderful. One thing I probably don't really like is that this 100 is currently a string. I want it to be a number, so I'm just going to later on I'm going to put float to convert it into a number. So the name equals to the line info index 0, right? And then the balance is going to be equal to float line info 1. Okay, wonderful. So from here, we go ahead and print main name as this much money balance. Okay, and I go and comment this out. Then we can see that Alice has this much money, 100.0, Bob has this much money, 200.0, and so on. So this is just a debugging statement that I print to tell myself what I'm doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and print. So now we have our bank balances stored in, we have our balance of each person stored in variable balance and name of the represent the name of the person. And each one of these, so let's go ahead and update our bank balances. So we create a dictionary as we did in the previous video, in the previous lesson, right? Containing the dictionary will map each person's name, which is the key, to the person's balance, which is the value. So let's go ahead and update it. So for each one of these lines, right, representing a person, each one of these lines inside the for loop, I have the name and balance stored in the variables. So I'm going to write bank balances name equals to balance. Okay, so I can go ahead and comment this out, and at the end of it, right, let's see, we press run, currently no errors, wonderful. So after that, we can try print bank balances. Okay, currently this is returned, but this is a typo. So I'm just gonna crop this out. Yeah, because I just snipped it from a function instead. So we'll see the return later. So we go ahead and print bank balances right now. We're gonna see that now we have a dictionary containing the name mapped to the bank balance of each person. So if I go ahead and query, let's say Alice as a key, then I'm going to see 100. And this is perfect. So this means that we have successfully read from the text file, which the Python originally, right? Python originally saw the text file as just one massive string, one massive word, right? But after that, using some processing over here, we have read it line by line, then we have did some cleaning up, right? And then we have accessed the name and balance, and now we have translated the information encapsulated in this text file into the dictionary. So essentially, we have processed the information from the text file into the dictionary using just these lines of code. So that's what I mean by processing the information in the text file to store it into your program variables. Then using the program variables, we can edit it, right? Then after that, we can store it back into the text file. So that is the flow. That's the program flow that you want to that you want if you want to achieve saving things into a file. Okay, so now we have things stored in bank balances. That's wonderful, right? Let's make things into a function so that it's nicer. So we just declare all of this in a function. So I'm just going to put in a spacing over here, indentation, right? And I'm gonna define a function. Let's call the function load, whereas we're loading from a file. Okay, so I'll write some comments over here, reading from file, and then this is the balances of customers in our bank, and then this opens the file, and this for each line right? So this line, like when we do the strip replace split, right? It it converts line to list, right? Then now line info is a list. Then this one is retrieving info because our index 0 is our name, our index 1 is our balance stored as a string. Then balance, this one is just retrieving info, converting to decimal, converting to a float, right? Data type. And lastly, storing info in dictionary. At the end of it, yeah. So that's what I've done over here is I've added a bunch of these green text, right? This green text is known as comments, as we have talked about in our first video. These are comments, right? And these comments, they are not actual code. So these comments allow me to talk to the reader to inform him what I'm doing in my code. So as you can see, right, previously without comments, my code looked something like that, right? And it was very confusing for someone who comes to read my code to be like, what in the world is this guy doing? But now, if I write all these green stuff, then I'm writing all these comments to tell the reader, right, who is probably another programmer. So if somebody wants to take over my project, right, then carry on adding to my project, then he needs to understand my project first. He needs to understand my code. So he's going to read these comments and he's going to understand, okay, index 0 is the name. That's why we write this line. So these comments are, we're starting to get a glimpse of, we're starting to get a glimpse of what writing real world code is, right? Instead of just writing code that only you understand, you need to make sure that you write documentation that is good and easy for other people to understand. So this is also starting to get into what it means to really program in the real world. Okay, so now we have loaded from our function, and at the end of it, we just return our bank balances. So the reason why I return it for now instead of printing, like previously we printed it out, but I want to return it because you see how it fits into the later part of the program. Later we're gonna call the load function, right, in our bank app, and then we're gonna return this. So we're gonna set like the bank equals to whatever the function returns. You'll see that later. But for now, instead of printing it out, I want to return it. Okay, so that's for reading from a file. What for writing to a file? So right, let's say um let's say our let's say we have some dictionary called bank balances, right? We should pass into a function called save. Okay, so this will be some code to write to a file. So this is some function that we're going to implement. So how do I write to a file? I use with open. Okay, let's call the file that we want to write to bank.text. And then we open as f.write something. What do we need to write? We don't know at the moment, but because we're only gonna write one shot, right? So if we try to write line by line, right, what's gonna happen is you write one line, then the next line you try to write it's gonna overwrite the previous line. So we need to write it just one shot. So to do so, we cannot write line by line. We need to save all the lines into one massive string, and then the strings will be, each line will be separated by new line characters, the \n. So the giant string, let's just call it save string, and um and it's going to be blank for now. And then at the end of it, we're going to write one time the save string. So now we have some code to populate, right? To populate save string with the stuff we want to save. Okay, yeah, so here we're going to write some code. But before that, let me just quickly change this. Instead of writing test.text, right, I'm going to use bank.text from now on because that's going to be our save file. Okay, so here we need to write some code to save to a string. Sorry, we need to write some code to save to convert our dictionary into a multiple line text format. So for example, our dictionary, right? For example, our bank balances equal to something like Alice, right? And then you have colon 100, right? So this is our bank balances dictionary, but we want to convert it into a format that looks like this, right? This is the one that we save to a file. So this is the one we have in our program, in our Python program, and this is the one we're going to save to a file. So this is where you come in and you decide, how do I want to convert the dictionary into into a format that can be nicely saved to a file. To do so, I first need to go through all the items in the dictionary, like go through all the users. So that would be for I in, how do I access the items in dictionary? I call the dictionary, right, dot items. Okay, then for loop, for colon, enter, I see the indentation appear. Okay, so then save string equals to, I need to append to a string, I need to add to the string. So save string equals to the current string plus some additional stuff. So what would that be? That will be the the key, right? The key is the index 0, right? And then plus the colon and then the space, right? We want the space over here for nicer reading. Then we have plus, and then we have I1, which is the balance. But because currently this is a float, we need to convert it to a string. And lastly, at the end of it, we put a new line to separate the different users. If not, you're going to see something like that, right? If not, you're going to see something like that. But instead, we want Alice and Bob to be on two separate lines. Yeah. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So that's saving to a bank. So if I go ahead and okay, so with this, right, we have two functions that can load and save from, we can load to a file, we load from a file, right, read from a file, or we can save to a file and write to a file. So let's go ahead and revisit our banking app. So previously we had our, let's take a look at our code. It's over here, somewhere here. Okay, so previously with our virtual bank code, right? So let's go ahead and copy the link and retrieve our previous bank code. So what might that look like? Okay, so it is this. Okay, so let's copy this code and paste it at the bottom over here. Okay, then I'm gonna switch to side-by-side view to make it easier to see. Okay. Okay, so we have our load function, right? Which we wrote a while ago. We have our save function, which we wrote a while ago. And then we have the rest of the bank code. So if I go ahead and run this, it's just going to be the previous bank example. I can deposit, withdraw, sort by money, calculate total value, and quit. So we quit the program. Okay, so how do I add in the options to load and save from a file? So let's call them option 5, save, right? And option 6, load. And then option 7 will be quit. So these are just three additional options that if I press run now, you see that they appear in the menu. They're just print statements. So okay, so now we want to, if the user's input is going to be 7, then we want to quit. Right? It's no longer 5. 5 is now representing save. So else if the user input is 5, then we want to save. So how do we save? We type save, and what do we need? When we call the function save, we need to pass in the bank balances. We need to pass in the current dictionary representing all the balances. So we call save with a parameter inside, which is our bank dictionary. Then else if the user input 6, right? Then we are going to load. So we call load, right? And what does load do? Loads it from the bank.txt file, which eventually returns the dictionary representing all the bank balances. So so this load, right, this returns the dictionary, and we can capture the dictionary using bank equals to load. So actually that's pretty much it. So if you go ahead and press run, you'll see that now we have these options. If I go ahead and open my file, okay, so let's go ahead and run save, right? Then you see that a new file has been created, bank.txt. And in fact, it contains the 4 users' information. So let's say, okay, so let's say I put withdraw a deposit, right? Let's say I'm deposit to Alice account $1,000. Then now Alice is $1,100, right? So if I want to save to the file, I press 5, and the moment I press enter, you're gonna see that Alice is gonna change from 100 to 1,100. Okay, wonderful. So let's say I quit the program. Let's say I quit the program now, and I press run again. So I run the program again. At the current moment, right, if I print sort by money, you see Alice is 100. That's because we haven't loaded this file yet. So if I press 6, right, for load, then you're gonna see that if I print sort by money now, you can see that Alice has 1,100. So now we have a way for our program to talk to our previous. So right now, right, our previous program's execution, the previous time we ran the program, we edited some values, and then we want to save those values. We will save them into the bank.txt file. In this text file, as you can see, and then after we save it here, this, right, after we stop the program, this file still remains there. This file still contains this information. And we have written code, right, that when we run, we can retrieve the information by typing load, right, which is option 6. So when you type 6, then the Python program retrieves the information from the text file. So the bank, just like how variables are containers of information, right, your text file is a container of information also, just that it stores a string, it stores a bunch of text, and it stores it permanently on the hard drive of the computer instead of uh, in your runtime space. So essentially what we have done in this lesson is we've gone through number one, I've taught you ways to Google, right? Google your way through and learn by Googling, right? Learn how to Google certain things that you want to do. And number two, we have learned how to process text files. So we have learned how to read from text files, right, that store information from our previous program. Then we also learn how to write two text files to store our current program's information in a text file so that another program may access it in future. So yeah, actually that's how the saving files work. So like this is in a sense how programs save information permanently. How your Microsoft Word, right? They store it in the docx file. So yeah, I hope that you have learned something from this lesson. Yeah, so if at the end of this lesson, right, today we have essentially built our first useful application, and in a case a bank app which can now save and load from a file, so it retains information across different runtimes. Then at the moment we have quite an ugly user interface, but this is the core functionality, and the rest of the user interface is honestly just a matter of building a website around it. Like, but this is the core. This is the main meat, the main bone of the program, right? Everything else is just a skin. And if you have digested all these lessons so far, right, lesson 1 to 4, then honestly you have quite a lot of power in your hands because you are able to do majority of things with your knowledge already. In fact, you're able to create a role-playing game, right? With just if-else statements, right? And using variables to store things like currency, how much money, your sword's power, and stuff like that. You can, yeah, you can actually get creative and create your entire role-playing game using just if-else statements. And then now you can save the progress of your player's game in a text file so that when the player turns the computer off, right, and goes to sleep, if he hits save before he turns it off, then he can save his progress in a text file. And in fact, this is how how games like Cookie Clicker actually saved the information in the earlier versions of the game. So editing your number of cookies was as simple as opening the text file and changing the number manually. But now, of course, they obfuscate it in a certain way. So this allows you to create certain games already, right? And your creativity is really the limit. Um, And I know that these courses were quite fast-paced. So as for the last lesson, which is lesson 5, today is the second last lesson. So for the last lesson, we will be going through some miscellaneous stuff that I glossed over. For example, for loop, some intricacies of the for loop. And these are miscellaneous stuff that wouldn't be too difficult to digest, right? They'll just be conceptually simple because you have already learned the main meat of the concepts in these 4 lessons. But these additional syntax stuff is just to polish up your understanding so that when you see code out there, you may be more able to understand them. Yeah, so if not, that's pretty much it. I hope that you guys have benefited from these lessons, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.